Hello, guys, and welcome to your Bitcoin report. In this Bitcoin report this morning, what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to remind you guys what Bitcoin has been through. So we see this precipitous fall off in price from almost $20,000 all the way down to $3,000. And we got these people out there screaming that Bitcoin's going to go all the way down to zero and become totally worthless, which in my mind is a totally ridiculous argument. To understand what Bitcoin's going through right now, first thing we have to do is we have to understand where Bitcoin has come from. Then we can see more clearly what it's going to do into the future from its past behavior. So let's take a quick look into its past behavior by starting up the charts right here and get right into it here. We're going to go to the historical chart of Bitcoin. And by looking at this historical chart, you can see that Bitcoin's not going to go down to zero. In fact, it's getting ready for something entirely different than they expect. First off, we're going to have to focus in here. We're going to have to change the chart, and we're going to have to take a look at when Bitcoin really started to kind of take off. We're going to go back in history, back to the year 2013, and we're going to see what happened. Okay. This is one of the first times that Bitcoin really took off in price, and this is where I got started in Bitcoin. Was right here. I got interested in it right along in here someplace when it was about $70, and I went online that night, and I take a look at Bitcoin, and I said, I'm going to buy me one of those. That's what I said to myself. Those are like $70 a piece. And I studied it a little bit, and I found out what it was. And I said, that's not a Ponzi scheme. See, when my mother first told me about it, I mean, a year or so earlier, I could have had them for like $10 or something. And I said to her, I said, that's a Ponzi scheme. I said, that's all going to disappear. I said, it's a Ponzi scheme. But I did a little bit more research into it, and I found out right along in here someplace, 50, 60, $70. I found out, hey, you know what? It's not a Ponzi scheme. When I realized what it really was, and it dawned on my mind, hey, and I did some research into it, and I said, oh, my goodness. I said, I want me one of those. So I went right out to buy one, but I couldn't figure out how to buy them. I went to Mt. Gox, and I couldn't figure out their stupid system of how you purchase them or whatever. And by a day or two later, by the time I wanted to buy one, I come back on here and I was looking at the price, and it was like up to like $187 or $190 or something. And then the next day they were like 200 and something bucks, and I was like, oh no, I've missed the boat. I thought I've missed the boat, But, then the price did come back down into the area that I was looking at to buy it, but I wasn't quick enough. And by the time I really started to buy it, I bought it, I paid about $150 for it. And anyway, that's long story short. I paid a little bit more, but anyway, I bought about $150 worth, I suppose. So anyway, getting back to the story. What do we see here? We see this precipitous rise in Bitcoin. Doesn't it look like when it went up to $20,000? Right there? But it's not $20,000. It went up to $250. But it doesn't matter. It's like when they say about age. They say age is just a number. Right? It's the same thing with Bitcoin. This is just a number. But look at the chart. It looks exactly like the same thing that we're going through right now. Doesn't it? When you just compare charts for charts, it looks exactly like the Bitcoin chart we got right now. Let's take a look at the Bitcoin chart we got right now. Oh, let's take a look at that. And now let's take a look at this. Well, it's the same looking thing. So we see Bitcoins went through it there. So what happened? Bitcoin stretched out into the future, and it makes the next raise in price. Look how small that one was that we were just looking at compared to the next one it did when it went all the way up to $1,150. It fooled everybody back here. When it fell off, when it cooled off, it fooled everybody. So what did it do here? It did exactly the same thing, but look what it did after. It went back down again, and honest to God, when it was back down to here, about $200 or whatever, it had everybody fooled. There was an awful lot of people in the media then that thought it was going to go down to zero. More than there is now. A lot more of them out there preaching it was going to go down to zero than it is now. So when we and look, when we compare that raise in price to the next one that came after that, it dwarfed it again. The one that went up to $20,000. It's just in this process of doing this same repeated thing over and over and over again. And right now, it's just lining itself up to make another massive move to the upside. And every time it makes a move to the upside, it's that much greater than its previous move to the upside. I personally believe that this thing is not going to stop until it's gobbled up all of the value of everything in the world. And what's going to drive it to do that is totally greed. So right now, where are we sitting in this position of this whole thing? Well, let's take a look at this story right here. It says, this year, what was the most asked question on Google? People type in Google. What do they want to know? What's the biggest thing they want to know? Well, what they wanted to know most was, what is Bitcoin? So we see what's happening right now is the world is starting to learn about Bitcoin. It's starting to come out of the closet, and people are starting to say, hey, what is this stuff? What is Bitcoin? Well, that's the phase we're in right now. They're just learning what it is. The next phase is they're all going to want themselves some, especially when the price starts to go back up again. And not just people, but institutional investors are just starting to really get involved with this. And this is perfect for institutional investors. It's not like the precious metals market. The precious metals market is no good for institutional investors. What's a guy, say a guy's got takes care of a portfolio of $10 billion of different clients of his. He's a money manager. He can't go out and buy precious metals. Not in a real form anyway. He might be able to buy GLD, but that's an awful risky trade because it's been a poor performer. Why would he even want to touch it? But he certainly can't buy the real precious metals you can put in your hand, because he'd have to buy a whole dump truck full of them. Where's he going to store them without having them stolen? But they can move into the cryptocurrency space, those institutional investors, and believe me, when they start to move in, watch what happens to the price of cryptocurrencies, all the way across the board, all of the cryptocurrencies, when the institutional investors finally start to move into this space. What they're waiting for, really, is Bitcoin ETFs, which are coming. It's just one of the problems with them is one is insuring the ETFs, and the other problem is taking possession of the physical asset, the underlying asset. There's a couple problems there that they're having, and they're going to get those ironed out. In fact, I've heard that several proposals now have figured out how to make the underlying asset availability issue go away or whatever, and they're solving these problems. In other words, they're getting closer, and they're getting closer by the day to having trading platforms and ways to move these coins into the big boys, into the institutional investors. It's getting closer and closer by the day, the institutional investors. So I think the next move upwards is going to be when the institutional investors start to actually flow into the space. The big-time institutional investors. And right now it's such a small space. Seriously, when Bitcoin is completed doing what it's going to do, what I believe it's going to do, and I talk about Bitcoin, I'm talking about all the cryptocurrencies, I think their value is going to go up 1,000-fold from what it is now. So in other words, 1,000 times. I think that any dollar invested now is probably going to yield 1,000 times. It's going to go up that much, quite seriously. I mean, there's been talk for years about Bitcoin going to $1 million, and I think it could exceed that. But by the time it gets to that goal, the dollar's going to be gone. You're not going to price it in dollars anymore. Bitcoin is going to be Bitcoin. It's going to be the standard. This is where I believe we're actually going with this. And right now, on this side of things, it sounds almost ridiculous even talking about this, saying that Bitcoin is going to be the world standard, the world standard for money. But when it gets there, it won't be a ridiculous subject whatsoever. Everybody's going to want Bitcoin. Everybody will be paid in Bitcoin. Everybody will want Bitcoin. So this is where I think all this is going. So I think a very tiny investment right now, just the money you'd spend on the lottery, you know, will yield a massive investment later. And the only problem is holding it all the way through to the end when it becomes what it's going to become. So in other words, what I'm saying is if you buy a little bit of Bitcoin right now, say you buy $100 worth, and say that $100 turns into $10,000, right? Okay? You're going to be awful tempted to sell it because you need bills you got to pay or whatever else, you know? And so, say you do sell it at the top. It'll probably go through the same process that we just went through where Bitcoin went to 20,000 and then drop back all over again. So say Bitcoin goes all the way up to $100,000 a coin. It'll do that same process of dropping back again. And everybody will they'll get negative again. The whole market will get negative before it goes up the next one, up higher again. It's just going to keep doing this stupid thing of going up really high, bubble popping, coming back down, and then going up higher than it ever was before. It's done that over and over again. It's going to continue to do that into the future until it's number one. That's what I see. Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.